Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're going to be painting Snowcap Mountain from Mother 3. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. I've chosen to do Mother 3 this week, and I have a lot of ideas for Mother 3, but for some reason Snowcap Mountain's been kind of calling to me. So I went ahead and sketched it, and I'm going to put a snowman in it, and the first thing I need to do is go ahead and fill in the sky. So in order to do that, I mixed up a color on my palette, and I started with a little bit of primary cyan and magenta, and then mixed some of the titanium white in it. And then I just realized it wasn't quite the right blue I wanted, so I put a little bit of ultramarine blue in there too, and that kind of made it a bit more violet. And then I still have some of the titanium white on my palette because I'm going to make it a bit lighter towards the bottom, just to sort of make a transition there so it's not a flat color. I'm going to go ahead and start this kind of near the top, and I don't need to do across the whole way because I will be adding some of the other mountains and stuff in over here, but I do want to make sure I fill everything in. So I'm going to go maybe 2/3 of the way over and just bring the blue down. Once I have that far enough down, I'm just going to grab a bit of the titanium white and start at the bottom and work that up. The next thing in my sketch are these faraway mountains over here, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of draw those in, and then we'll mix up a paint. If I need to, I can just grab a ruler and make sure my lines are nice and straight. Because my background's just a little bit wet, my chalk didn't quite show up in all the areas. So I know you probably can't see it on video, but trust me, it's there. So the thing I'm going to do next is I've mixed up kind of this very, very light gray with a touch of blue in it, and this is going to be my base color for the mountains. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill all of this in, all the way down under the bottom of the canvas on the right side where it gets covered up here. So fill this in, and then I'm going to add some texture to it. Now I put a canvas board here, and it's just a thin little board, and I use it for practice. Sometimes if I want to try how something goes or try a few things before I move on to the actual canvas to see. You can actually see some of my older paintings here, like this was the World 4-3. This was a practice for Skyrim. I was trying to figure out if I could do auroras, and I wasn't like how they were looking, but I decided to paint some of the mountains on here and kind of see how it went. I wanted to try something a bit different than just making it look more true to the game, which is basically just the blue with a little bit of white. I wanted to kind of do mountains like Bob Ross did, so I have a palette knife. Normally I use these for mixing on my palette, like I use them to scoop up colors. Maybe not this size one, but the other ones I use for that. So I decided to try this. I painted everything blue before, and then I decided I was going to mix up a dark color, kind of a medium color, and then just use plain white. And then I did a test. On this one I used a lot of those three colors. This one I tried to vary it up a little bit, and then this one I kind of used darker ones over here and then just white over here, and I kind of like this one best. It was really interesting to try it this way. It gives it a new texture, something I've never really tried before. So now I'm going to move to the actual canvas and then go over how I did this. Now I'm back to my actual canvas, and I think this is a left-handed palette knife and I'm right-handed. Or it's just a different for the way I want to do the mountains, but I want to have the light coming from the left, so all the shadows are going to be on the right, just like that practice board from a shot ago. So on the back of my palette knife I have a little bit of this dark paint. I just kind of set it down and scooped backwards. And I'm going to start over here, and then I'm just going to kind of lay it down along the edge of the knife and just push it into the canvas. And then I can use the front that doesn't have any paint on it to kind of scratch it around and kind of make shapes with it. Now I've realized I don't like it at all. There needs to be more definition to it somehow. They kind of look like cones with paint splatters as opposed to mountains, really. So I mixed up this blue color, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of fill it in. It's darker than the color that used to be there. And then I'm also going to fill in this dark color here, kind of on the left side where all the highlights go. So I'm just going to go ahead and repaint this and then fill in the dark. Now I'm taking some dark gray and I'm just going to go ahead and add in some shadows. So on the right side of the mountain, I'm just going to kind of use a brush and bring some of these in. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, and I just took some of this darker gray and mixed a little bit of white into it to make it lighter. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of add some shading into this part that's going to end up being the shades underneath the snow. Now that this part's done, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of snow on the shadow side of the mountain, and I'm doing that with this original kind of base layer I have, that darker blue, and then I mixed a little bit of light gray into it. And like I had tried the first time, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of pull it down from the mountain using the palette knife. Next I'm going to go back into the white and make sure I really get a good edge on these. I made a small little mountain here in the middle, and I kind of wanted it to be in the shadow of this one, so instead of doing the white snow, which would kind of just blend it in with this one here, I did kind of a lighter blue, so that makes it look like it's in the shadow. Now I'm going to jump over to this and finish this one up. Because my next step involves drawing, I made sure everything dried really well. So moving back to my sketch, I'm going to go ahead and start to draw in some of this. I'm not going to draw in the small details like the tree, the snowman, and the rock, but kind of this cliff face here and then the top of the snow where the top of this cliff starts. I'm going to go ahead and draw those in first so I can start painting them. Now with these foreground things, the mountains have a lot of texture back here, and when I paint over this you'll still see it through the paint, so I want to make sure I use a lot of paint and make kind of a new texture on top of that so you can't see the old one. So I've mixed up this color and it's kind of similar to what I was using on the mountains with some cyan and white and black, and it's going to be kind of my base layer just to kind of smooth everything out, and then just like before I'll add some more texture and value to it as that dries, but I mixed up a lot of it here. So I can really kind of cake it onto the surface and give it a new texture and kind of even out what's there already. For the top part here that's going to have the snow on it, I want to make sure I'm doing something useful. And I mean, I know the white's going to even out the texture, but it's not going to give me any value, and I'm just going to have to completely do it from scratch essentially if I do it later. So I've mixed up a very, very light blue-gray, and this is going to be my base color for here. So just like I did the dark gray, this is going to be filled in to even out the texture and to give me a good base to start to fill in some shades and values for the snow. Out of these two areas, I'm doing the rocks first. So I still have some of this color and I'm kind of just working in sections by painting a little bit of the original color just to sort of get it wet. And then I'm taking a little bit of white and making shapes out of it. I've decided to give this another coat, and now that it's done, it just finished, it's still kind of drying, I'm going to go ahead and start to add in some of the value while it's wet. Because there's a second coat on it, I don't have to worry about it kind of picking up the paint and showing the background. So I'm just going to go ahead and start adding some value. So the thing I want to show most is kind of this long streaky quality to these rocks, and I want it to blend in. So I'm starting with white, and I want to have these long streaks and then kind of show the cliff face turning around the side here. And then I'm going to get all the extra paint on my brush. I'm not washing it, but I'm going to go ahead and get all the extra paint off, go back into my mid-tone, and then try and do some blending. Now you'll notice I'm leaving a lot of open space. I want to have some of the shadows come in too, so I want to make sure that there's space for them. If they're too close together, there's not going to be any of the mid-tone, so I want to make sure that I have that space. The first thing is I wanted to point out how I kind of made this line wavy instead of straight. I did that when I did the second coat. And then the second thing is once I'm happy with how this looks, I can go ahead and wash my brush out so I don't have any of the extra white paint on there because it'll make gray instead of this nice blue color I have. And then I'll pick up some black and start doing the same thing but with the shadows. Now I've redone this side a few times and I'm still not quite happy with it, but before I go ahead and paint over it, I'm going to go ahead and try and touch it up to see if I can get something I like. Now I think it's important to show you guys some of my mistakes or kind of my process along the way of how things work, because I'm not perfect and sometimes I mess things up. This painting has been an exercise in frustration, that's for sure. I thought things would come together a lot more quickly. I think they would have turned out better in some respects. Sometimes I thought it would have gone faster and I wouldn't have had to redo it so much, but I think it's important for everyone to see that sometimes I do mess up and sometimes I have to fix things. So this one I just have to fix a lot of things, and so it's kind of frustrating, but it's important to take a step back, take a break sometimes, and then go back into the painting and work on it. So I'm going to go ahead and keep working on this part. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of liquid carbon black and just try and fix in some of these edges, because they kind of got a little soft because my paint had been wet. So I can kind of just make sure these edges are nice and crisp. Now that I'm happy with how this looks, I'm going to go ahead and just jump down to this piece and go ahead and do the same thing, giving it that same value, that same texture that I did. So I still have some of this blue mixed up. Just give it another coat to get it damp again. Now that I'm happy with this part and I finished this part down here, I can go ahead and start to work on this ground plane. So I just have a white pastel, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of fill in where I want this to go, because I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention when I did the rock, and that was because I wanted to make sure I had it right. I wasn't concerned because I was going to paint over it anyway, so I wanted to make sure I had it where I liked it. So now I can just go ahead and kind of add this back in. Now I'm repainting this white, and I'm really happy I put this light blue down because it's kind of giving some effect through here, almost like little bits of shadow with the snow. So I'm just going to go ahead and refill this in, let it dry, then add some value to the snow. To bring in some texture to the snow surface, I have some cyan, white and black. I've also kind of mixed them in different amounts. I kind of mixed a light gray and then a light blue gray between the three of them. So I'm going to be using those colors to bring in some value to this. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start with white. And I'm going to kind of get it wet, essentially, with the white paint again by giving it another coat. And then I can pick up some of my other colors. So I can bring a little bit of this light blue gray in here. And then I can go back to some white. and fade it out. And I can do the same with some of the plain gray I have, and some of the brighter white if I want, and even some black if I want it to get darker. But it's just going to bring some texture to the snow and kind of make some ridges and just some interesting things to look at so it's not solid. I'm really happy with how the ground turned out, and there will be more work done to it, but I'm going to add some trees and rocks and some other things, so they're going to get shadows onto the snow and kind of like snow that kind of goes up the top of the rock. So I will work on it more, and I still have all my colors on my palette, so I can just continue to work on that as I do my foreground objects. So I'm just going to take this chalk pastel and go ahead and start to draw in those objects, using a ruler to make my trees straight and kind of figuring out where things are going to go. I've mixed up a dark blue color, and I'm just going to go ahead and go over the trunks just so I have them marked in. Then I'm just going to start at the tops of each tree and kind of just fill in some of these branches. And then I'm going to work my way down, making my tree bigger. And because these trees are full of snow, I don't want my branches to go straight out like I would with a fan brush. I want them to kind of angle down. So that's how I'm going to kind of start to fill some of these in. The tree is really coming along, so now it's time to add some snow to weigh these branches down. So I've mixed up a very, very light gray with just a touch of blue, because everything is very blue in this painting. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of add in some snow. Now, I don't want to add too much, so that's totally a possibility, so I'm going to be very careful about that. And the other thing is I'm going to do another darker color kind of on the right for a shadow, and I'm also going to do a highlight of white on top of this. So this color is kind of my medium snow tone, so I'm going to kind of keep it on the left side of the tree because my sun is on the left side here. Now I've mixed up a darker version of that color. All I did was add a little bit of black into it. And I'm kind of using it just on the right side of the tree. I'll use it a little bit on the left, but it's going to kind of blend the two together. It's my darker color for snow. Now I think the difference is just too much, so I'm just taking some of the left snow color, the medium one, and just adding a little bit of it into the right side here. Then I'll just take some pure titanium white and just kind of add in a little bit of highlights. And I'm not trying to cover everything, but I'm just trying to add in just a little bit of the bright. Now I'm just going to add some dimension to the tree, and I have a very, very dark blue here. So there's a lot of black in it, and I'm just going to go ahead and under some of this snow, just tap in a little bit of this. Now I'm just going to add a little bit more shadows by using a blue, and it's not too much, it's just trying to add in a little bit. And then just kind of to make the tree look like it's actually sitting in the snow, I'm just going to bring a little bit of this drift up onto it. So I used some of the snow colors from the tree, and now I'm just going to take some white and kind of blend that up. And then I'm just taking the blue color I had from the snow, and I'm just trying to blend it in a little bit here. On this tree I just did a little bit more white just because it was all kind of gray and I wanted it to be white, bright white snow. So I did that, but over onto this tree next, I'm going to be doing the same thing as I did with this tree, except all of my branches are going to be just a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to push a little bit harder on the brush to make a bigger mark. Using the same light blue-gray, I'm going to go ahead and start to fill in the snow on this front tree. And I'm just doing the same motion, just tapping in the snow, trying to keep it a bit random and even throughout the tree, and making these patterns. And while I'm doing that, I thought I'd talk about why I decided to paint Mother 3 and why this scene. First off, Mother 3 is my favorite game. I've played Earthbound and I really liked it, and I was really excited to play Mother 3. I played it first in Japanese, and my 1 year of Japanese education, I actually got through it all right. I understood most of it, and I thought that was really cool because I had never tried doing that when I took French. I never tried reading anything or playing anything that was in French, so I thought it was cool that I could at least get through it. This scene's been calling to me. I don't know what it is about it, but I really wanted to paint it, and I really wanted to do it in this realistic style. So I'm really happy with how it's turning out, and it's been a really nice surprise for me to see it all come together, kind of in the way I pictured it, but also some things are just a little bit different, like kind of how this rock texture formed. The other thing is I grew up in the Midwest in Wisconsin. In fact, they have like a foot of snow there right now, and where I live now, it's been like 70 degrees and raining. So I kind of miss this big snow that falls on the trees, this movie snow as I always called it. And it was fun to paint because it just reminded me of that. And I do miss that about Wisconsin, but I don't miss the cold. But I'm just going to continue working on this snow on this tree just the same way I did this one. The next thing I want to do is put a little bit of a rock here, and I've already drawn it in with a chalk, so I've mixed up the same color I have over here, this kind of dark gray with just a touch of blue, and I'm going to go ahead and start to fill in this rock. And I'm just trying to keep it within these lines that I have, and then I'm going to add texture to it, and then I'm going to bring a little bit of the snow over it. Just like I did this tree trunk right here, the snow's going to kind of drift over the top of it. The last things I have to do are add in some of the foreground details, kind of like I had this rock here. There's going to be a present out here, and I'm going to put a snowman back here. Now, in the game, the snowman isn't actually there, he's kind of off to the side, but I wanted to include him because it just reminds you of this area of the game, and it also kind of reminds you of Earthbound because it's the snowman in Magenta. So I'm going to go ahead and use my chalk. I'm using gray this time because it kind of matches in with my colors, and white's not going to show up on top of the white snow. So I'm going to go ahead, draw those in, and then start giving them a base layer of white. Once I'm happy with the shape, it's time to start filling things in. So I'm going back to this palette because I still have my snow color and then I have some white. And I'm just going to be using these two colors to paint all of the snowmen except for like his details, like his hat. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the white and then kind of use the blue like I've done here to add some value. You can see how I'm kind of blending these two colors together to make it nice and smooth. I want to make sure that the bright highlight is over here on the left side of the snowman's body, and the shadow's over here on the right. I'm also making a shadow down along the base and a shadow where the next body part connects. So then I can just move on to the middle piece and go ahead and repaint this one white, and then use the same blue to go ahead and add shadows. And I'm going to do it the same way. Shadows on the right and then underneath where the head is. Painting the snowman reminds me, when I did my student teaching, we painted a big mural in the cafeteria, and each scene faded throughout all 4 of the seasons that were in Wisconsin. So on the very left one we had like snow activities, and then we had spring activities, summer activities, and then fall activities. And the area was very much, it was a very agricultural area, so there was a lot of farmland and there was plants growing, but I was in charge of helping the students with the winter scene, and this is actually how I taught them how to do the snowman and paint the snow. So they had painted a snowman and a bunch of like snowballs like stacked up to create a little fort and kids throwing snowballs, but it was just the same way, white with a little bit of this gray blue. I'm going to let that dry because I want to make sure I erase all of this extra chalk before I go ahead and put the hat on and the nose and the face. So I'm going to jump over to the present and give that a good coat of white first. And then I'm going to use more of a gray color for the shading on this because I want it to stand out and not kind of blend in. The snowman I use the blue because he's also made of snow, but the present isn't. So I want to make sure I use some gray on that instead. I erased the chalk because I didn't like how the placement was, so I'm going to actually put the real placement in the final placement, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill it in. For most of the parts of the snowman, it's just going to be solid black, so I just have a little bit on my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and fill it in. And then I can just use a tiny bit of white to add a little bit of highlight, but not a whole lot because it is pretty solid. For the top of the cap, I just have a dark gray with a touch of blue. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of fill in this dome. I'm going to be using a liquid black to fill in his eyes and his buttons. I have a little bit more control with it, trying to make these tiny circles, so I kind of prefer it for small details. Moving back to the gift box, I have a little bit of magenta, so I'm just going to go over these lines with that magenta. And I chose this over something like cadmium red because it feels a bit more pink in game to me. And also the nose on the snowman is kind of pink in game, so if I make that like a pinker orange and this like a pinker red, they'll kind of match and kind of give a little bit of harmony to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint right on these lines with the magenta, and then I'll take a little bit of white and black to give them a little bit of value. They're so small it's kind of pointless to add it, but I like to add in small details to my painting like that. While I'm waiting, it's a good time to go ahead and kind of fill in the base. Just like I did with the shadow on the rock, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the snowman and with the gift. For his nose, like I said, I'm trying to keep a little bit of this warm color yet, so I have some Pyrrole orange with a little bit of the magenta, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill in this nose. For the shading, I'm just using a little bit of dark brown for the bottom, and then a little bit of light orange for the top, and I'm going to kind of do some of those lines that carrots have down the sides. And we're done! We have our Snowcap Mountain scene for Mother 3. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a print or a poster or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.